He rolled onto the stage in a wheelchair, wearing a hospital gown and a blonde wig. 14,000 people at Reading Festival fell completely silent. They had come to boo Kurt Cobain for selling out. What happened in the next 90 minutes would change rock music forever. It was August 30th, 1992, and the air at Reading Festival was thick with anticipation and anger. Nirvana had just become the biggest band in the world with Nevermind, an album that had sold 10 million copies. But success had come with a price that was about to be paid in full. But what nobody in that crowd knew was that Kurt had been planning something in that bathroom just minutes before. Something that would either destroy his career or define it. For months, the British music press had been ruthless. Melody Maker, NME, Sounds, every major publication was running the same narrative. Kurt Cobain had sold out. The headlines were brutal. Nirvana goes pop. Cobain cashes in. The death of grunge integrity. The criticism wasn't just coming from journalists. Kurt's own fans had turned on him. At recent shows, people were shouting "Sellout" between songs. The punk community that had nurtured Nirvana felt betrayed. Kurt was drowning in the contradiction. He hadn't asked to be a spokesman for Generation X. All he'd ever wanted was to make honest music that expressed his pain and confusion. But now that honesty had become a commodity, and he was being punished for its success. In the weeks leading up to Reading, Kurt had been in a dark place. His stomach pain was getting worse. His heroin use was escalating, and the constant accusations of being a sellout were eating him alive. "They want me to fail," Kurt told his manager just days before Reading. "They want me to be dead or irrelevant. They can't handle that I succeeded while staying true to myself." What Kurt did next would make everyone wish they'd understood him sooner. Reading Festival 1992 was supposed to be Nirvana's triumphant homecoming. Instead, it felt like walking into a firing squad. Festival organizers were nervous. They'd heard rumors that fans were planning to throw bottles at the band. Some were talking about storming the stage. Backstage, just hours before the performance, Kurt was pacing in his dressing room. Dave Grohl and Krist Novoselic watched him with concern. They'd seen Kurt anxious before shows, but this was different. This felt like their frontman was preparing for war. "What if we just don't go on?" Dave suggested quietly. "We can say you're sick. We can cancel." Kurt stopped pacing and looked at his drummer with an intensity that was almost frightening. "No, I'm going out there, and I'm going to show them exactly what a sellout looks like." Nobody understood what he meant. Kurt disappeared into the bathroom and emerged 20 minutes later with a plan that would become legendary. When Nirvana was announced to take the stage, the crowd's reaction was mixed. About half were cheering, true fans who didn't care about the sellout accusations. The other half were booing, holding up signs that read, "Kurt Cobain, corporate rock whore," and "Nirvana equals sellouts." The stage remained empty for a long moment. The crowd was getting restless. Some people started chanting, "Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit." Then, from the darkness at the back of the stage, something appeared that made 14,000 people go completely silent. A figure in a wheelchair was being pushed slowly across the stage by a roadie. It was Kurt Cobain, but not the Kurt Cobain anyone expected. He was wearing a blonde wig, a hospital gown, and what appeared to be medical equipment. His face was painted pale, almost corpse-like. He looked like he was dying. The crowd didn't know how to react. The booing stopped. 14,000 people stood in shocked silence, unsure if this was real or performance art. Kurt sat motionless in the wheelchair as it was pushed to center stage. The roadie positioned him in front of the microphone, and for what felt like an eternity, Kurt just sat there, staring at the massive crowd with dead eyes. Then he spoke, his voice weak and raspy through the PA system. "I'm so glad to be here at Reading Festival. As you can see, I'm in perfect health and ready to rock." The sarcasm was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Some people in the crowd started to laugh nervously. Others remained silent, still unsure what they were witnessing. "The doctors didn't want me to come tonight," Kurt continued, his voice still weak but growing slightly stronger. "They said I was too fragile, too damaged, that I wouldn't survive performing for you people." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But I told them, I have to go. I have to show my fans what they've created. I have to show them what happens when you destroy someone for their success." The laughter had stopped now. The crowd was completely still, hanging on every word. "You wanted a train wreck," Kurt said, his voice suddenly shifting from weak to defiant. "You wanted me to fail. You wanted me dead or destroyed or irrelevant. Well, here I am. Is this what you wanted to see?" Then something happened that nobody expected. Kurt stood up from the wheelchair. He ripped off the hospital gown, revealing his regular clothes underneath. He tore off the blonde wig and threw it into the crowd. The dying rock star act was over. "Because if this is what you came to see," Kurt said, now speaking in his normal voice with an anger that was raw and real, "then you're going to be disappointed. I'm not dying. I'm not selling out. And I'm not going to apologize for making music that people actually want to hear." He picked up his guitar, and without any introduction, without any warning, Nirvana launched into "Rate Me." The choice of opening song was deliberate and controversial, and it sent shockwaves through everyone who knew what it meant. "Rate Me" was the track that Nirvana's record label, Geffen, had specifically asked them not to perform. It was too aggressive, too controversial, too uncommercial. The label wanted them to play the hits, to give the crowd what they expected. By opening with "Rate Me," Kurt was making a statement. "I don't work for you. I don't work for the label. I don't work for the critics. I work for the music." The crowd erupted. The people who had been booing were now screaming with approval. The energy in that field completely transformed. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was a declaration of independence. Kurt played that song with a ferocity that bordered on violence. He was attacking his guitar, screaming into the microphone, pouring every ounce of frustration and anger and pain into those 3 chords. Dave Grohl was destroying his drums. Chris Novoselic was thrashing on his bass like he was trying to break it. When "Rate Me" ended, Kurt didn't pause. He immediately launched into "Breed," another aggressive punk track that had nothing to do with commercial appeal. He was systematically avoiding all the radio-friendly hits, all the songs that had made them famous. He was proving a point. 45 minutes into the set, Kurt finally addressed the crowd directly, and what he said would be quoted in music magazines for the next decade. "I want to talk about something," Kurt said between songs. "I want to talk about this idea that I'm a sellout, that Nirvana betrayed the underground by becoming popular." The crowd was completely silent again, waiting. "Here's the thing nobody wants to admit," Kurt continued. "The punk scene, the underground scene, it's full of gatekeepers who think success equals failure, who think that the moment you connect with more than 100 people, you've compromised your integrity." He paused, wiping sweat from his face. "But that's bullshit. That's elitist bullshit. Why should good music only belong to people who shop at the right record stores? Why should honest expression only be valid if nobody hears it?" Someone in the crowd shouted agreement. Others joined in. "I didn't change my music to become popular," Kurt said, his voice growing more passionate. "I made the same music I've always made, the same angry, confused, fucked up music that comes from my actual life. The only thing that changed is that more people heard it." He gestured to the massive crowd in front of him. "And you know what? I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm not going to apologize for making music that resonates with people. I'm not going to apologize for your teenage sister liking my band. I'm not going to apologize for being on MTV." The crowd was roaring now, a mixture of cheers and emotional release. "The record label wanted me to wear different clothes, to change our sound, to be more accessible. I told them to fuck off. The label asked us not to play Rate Me tonight because it might offend sponsors, so we opened with it." Massive cheers erupted. "That's not selling out," Kurt said. Selling out is when you change who you are for money. I'm still the same fucked up kid from Aberdeen, Washington, who hates jocks and loves the raincoats and thinks most rock music is garbage. The only difference is now I can afford to eat. What happened next became one of the most iconic moments in rock history. Kurt started playing Lithium, but he changed the lyrics slightly, improvising new words that directly address the accusations. I'm not gonna crack. I'm not gonna sell out. I miss you. I miss the underground. By the end of the song, thousands of people in that crowd were crying. Not because of the music itself, but because they realized they'd been wrong. They'd taken their own insecurities about success and projected them onto someone who was just trying to be honest. The set continued for another 45 minutes. Kurt played deep cuts from Bleach, their underground debut album. He played covers of punk songs by bands nobody had heard of. He dedicated songs to independent record labels and underground zines. And only at the very end, almost as an afterthought, did Nirvana play Smells Like Teen Spirit. But even then, Kurt subverted expectations. Halfway through the song, he stopped playing and started deconstructing it, explaining to the crowd how the song was actually a mockery of dumb rock anthems, how it was never meant to be taken seriously. But you didn't see through it, Kurt said. You made it an anthem. You made it important. And now you're mad at me for your misunderstanding. It was brutal honesty delivered to 14,000 people who weren't sure whether to laugh or cry. When the set finally ended, Kurt did something that nobody expected. Instead of leaving the stage immediately, he sat down on the edge of the platform, his legs dangling, and just talked to the crowd like they were sitting in his living room. I want to tell you something real, Kurt said, his voice quieter now, more vulnerable. The crowd was completely silent. I've been thinking about quitting, about breaking up the band and disappearing, because I can't handle being called a sellout every day. I can't handle people telling me I betrayed them by being successful. The crowd was completely silent. But tonight made me realize something, Kurt continued. The people calling me a sellout are just afraid. They're afraid that if I can be successful while staying true to myself, it means they have to try harder. It means they can't use staying underground as an excuse for their own failures. He stood up, picking up his guitar one more time. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to keep making the music I want to make. I'm going to keep saying what I want to say. And if that makes me popular, fine. If it makes me hated, fine. But I'm not going to let anyone, not the label, not the critics, not even you, tell me who I'm supposed to be. Then Nirvana played one more song. Territorial Pissings, a thrashing punk track that was as uncommercial and aggressive as anything they'd ever recorded. Kurt was screaming, destroying his guitar, creating feedback and noise that sounded nothing like the polished, radio-ready version of Nirvana that critics accused them of becoming. When it was over, Kurt smashed his guitar on the stage, threw the pieces into the crowd, and walked off without saying goodbye. The aftermath of Reading Festival 1992 was immediate and profound. Every major music publication that had been calling Nirvana sellouts suddenly changed their tune. Melody Maker's headline the next day read, "Cobain confronts critics, the most important performance of the decade." NME, which had been particularly vicious in their attacks, published a full apology. We were wrong about Nirvana. We were wrong about Kurt Cobain. What we witnessed at Reading wasn't a sellout. It was an artist refusing to be limited by our narrow definitions of integrity. But more importantly, the Reading performance changed the conversation about success in alternative music. Kurt had articulated something that many artists felt but couldn't express. That staying true to yourself and becoming popular weren't mutually exclusive. Within months, other alternative bands stopped apologizing for their success. Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, all of them pointed to Kurt's Reading performance as the moment when it became okay to be both authentic and popular. The wheelchair entrance became iconic, analyzed in music documentaries and cultural studies courses as a piece of performance art that brilliantly satirized the media's obsession with Nirvana's supposed decline. Kurt had literally embodied the dying, damaged rock star that the press wanted him to be, then rejected that image by standing up and playing the most honest, aggressive set of his career. For Kurt personally, Reading 1992 was cathartic but not healing. While he'd successfully defended his integrity to the world, the internal struggles that drove his pain, his stomach issues, his drug addiction, his complicated relationship with fame remained unresolved. "I proved I wasn't a sellout," Kurt told Michael Azerrad months later, "but I still don't know how to be successful without feeling guilty. I still don't know how to be famous without feeling fake." The people who were at Reading Festival that night never forgot what they witnessed. Many of them describe it as the moment they understood that integrity isn't about staying small or unknown. It's about refusing to compromise your vision, regardless of how many people are watching. "I came to Reading planning to throw a bottle at Kurt Cobain," one attendee wrote years later. "I left understanding that I'd been hating him for having the courage I lacked. He didn't sell out. He just succeeded while the rest of us made excuses." The bootleg recording of Reading 1992 became one of the most widely circulated Nirvana recordings among fans. Not because of the music quality, but because you can hear the transformation happening in real time. You can hear a crowd go from hostile to supportive. You can hear Kurt's anger transform into clarity. You can hear the moment when an artist draws a line and refuses to cross it. In the years since Kurt's death, Reading 1992 has taken on almost mythical significance. It's cited by musicians, activists, and artists as an example of how to maintain integrity under pressure, how to confront your critics without compromising yourself, how to succeed without selling out. "That performance taught me that you don't owe anyone an apology for your success," Billie Joe Armstrong of Green Day said years later. "You only owe them honesty." Kurt gave them brutal, uncomfortable, beautiful honesty, and that's worth more than any amount of underground credibility. The wheelchair, the hospital gown, the blonde wig, all of it was Kurt's way of saying, "You want me to be sick? You want me to be dying? Fine. Let me show you what that looks like, and then let me show you that I'm stronger than your expectations." On August 31st, 1992, at Reading Festival, Kurt Cobain was called a sellout by 14,000 people. By the end of the night, he'd redefined what it meant to have integrity in the modern music industry. He'd proven that you could be successful and authentic, popular and honest, commercial and uncompromising. Most importantly, he'd shown that the only person who gets to define what selling out means is the artist themselves. Everyone else is just noise.